Boris is a Japanese three-piece rock metal band with one of the most unique discographies in the history of music, and in my opinion, one of the greatest. What makes Boris so fantastic is that they have an incredible level of patience as musicians, and they are very prolific and very multifaceted. They make albums in tons of different sounds and genres and styles, all while maintaining this overall blanket sound of Boris. Their first album, Absolute Ego, is like a 60-minute drone song. It's just one long track of drone. But 4 years later, they'd make another album-length song in the form of Flood, their third album, which is sort of like a drone piece in that there's lots of droning repetitive riffs, except that it's really more of one gigantic post-rock song. It's basically just the most epic post-rock song of all time. And in between those albums, they put out other albums which were more of a song collection, more of a typical album structure, in the form of Amplifier Worship, which, in spite of the fact that there were multiple songs, there's only like 5 of them, and most of them are insanely long. But after Flood, they put out an album called Heavy Rocks, which is just like a 12-track intense-ass hardcore punk album with the tuning of like a real deep sludge heavy metal drone band. By the time this album came out, Boris had completely defied any kind of classification. By now, they'd released a drone album, a post-rock album, another drone album that's like more typical but has like this real hard heavy metal punk edge to it, and then just suddenly a punk album with like a drone heavy metal edge to it. After that, Akuma no Uta doubled down on that dichotomy, having a couple of songs that are insanely long and then other ones that are like 3-minute punk songs. Their 6th album, Boris at Last Feedbacker, is another of these like single hour-long tracks, and it kind of combines the different sounds of what Boris had done up to that point a little bit more in one complete package, as if to suggest they were like tying up, you know, this era with a bow, and then from there on, things just get even weirder. This is when we enter the era of Boris being absurdly prolific. They start doing splits with other artists, they start doing collaborative albums, they start just releasing random lives and EPs. You never know what you're gonna get.
I think it turned out real well.
Awesome. Sometimes they've got 3 albums coming out in the same year. They start doing noisier, more experimental sounds on the Thing Which Solomon Overlooked series of albums, which is where Boris, I think, finally started making music that was so abrasive that people in their main audience weren't necessarily seeking it out. Like, not every Boris album is really considered beloved by their fans, but what Boris has done so well is to put out so much music that they can get away with releasing really weird shit. Their fans are just gonna hold out, and sometimes they'll find some, you know, unique experience in it that they didn't expect to have. When Boris started making their own brand of pop music with their Attention Please album in the 2010s, then people started to really falter on whether they were still into the band or not, but then they would turn around and release an album like Asia, which is just like crunching harsh noise in 20-minute chunks. It's because Boris has basically released whatever the fuck they want and just kept it relatively within the same kind of general idea of sound that like their audience can generally appreciate. While some audience members probably hate some of their albums or just don't really frequent them, almost everyone has at least some fans who herald it as the best Boris album. When people put the band on recommendation charts, they almost always pick the album Pink because it has this really even blend of their more heavy post-rock sound and then also the punk rock sound that they were doing, and there's a few tracks that kind of go into the upper lengths, so it's a real good like mishmash idea of like the most accessible Boris album. But then Flood is one that has like a real intense cult following of people like me who that's their favorite Boris release because it's just this giant magical post-rock song, and it really has nothing to do with their heavy rock sound, which some people like the most and therefore favor the album Heavy Rocks. Drone fans are usually into Feedbacker or Absolute Ego. And in between all that, they've even done weird offshoot stuff like soundtracks to movies that don't exist in the form of properat. And while those don't tend to be the most popular Boris albums, because a lot of them aren't necessarily as like amazing or memorable as the previous ones, some people still might get a kick out of it. And like, I tend to like almost every weird thing that Boris has done. I even like their collaborations with Merzbow, because I'm someone who listens to fucking Merzbow. But I really do think that if you are into like heavy rock music at all, Boris probably has an album for you. If you like, you know, just heavier sounding post-rock songs, if you like that kind of epic swelling music, you're probably gonna enjoy Flood. If you like, you know, hardcore, intense rock and roll, you're probably gonna like heavy rocks. And if you're a fucking freak like me, you like Sunbaked Snow Cave. But the best part is Boris even seems to understand that their audience is not gonna come to every product equally. They actually perform live shows where they'll just play one album or one specific style of their music, which I think is a really fucking great idea. Best live show I've ever been to was Boris performing Flood live. Everyone in the audience was there for Flood. Like, everyone clearly knew this song really well, and it was kind of magical getting to hear like such a powerful song with so many people who know it, because I've been to shows of bands like Opeth, for instance, where they were playing stuff from all over their discography, and certain parts of the crowd clearly don't care for the new material, and like, it's just kind of a clusterfuck. Like, people aren't even paying attention to the stage during certain songs. So yeah, I really like the way that Boris organizes their live shows and everything, and they're just a great band in general. You should check them out. Listen to these albums I've talked about if those sounds are something that you're interested in. If it's your first time, just go listen to Pink. Everyone recommends it as the starting point, and it's as good as any other. See you in the next one.